Okay, so I'm the Crown Attorney in this matter. I'm going to start by an examination in chief of the witness, Alex Riley. Ms. Riley, my understanding is you've previously been sworn, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, then we'll proceed directly into questioning. Please state your full name for the record.
Alex Riley.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Riley?
I am a fire prevention officer and an investigator with the Mariposa Fire Service. I'm also responsible for the inspection of residential, industrial, commercial, and other public buildings to ensure compliance with our fire laws and regulations. Finally, I'm also a member of the Canadian Association of Fire Investigators and have over 10 years of experience in fire prevention and investigation.
Thank you, Ms. Riley. And where were you on the night of July 19th, 2019?
On Friday, July 19, 2019, I was dispatched to 50 Knightsbridge Garden Circle to inspect a 2-story detached house.
And you did attend there?
Yes, I did.
And did you undertake the inspection?
Yes, I did.
And so when you attended the premises, did you make any notes, or what did you observe?
I attended the premises and I noted a number of violations of the fire code related to retrofits. Retrofits are necessary to bring existing buildings up to the current minimum life safety standards. I saw a number of bedrooms with door numbers on them as well, and these doors were locked.
So you said that there are numbers on the doors. Were you aware of who was residing at that building or the living arrangements?
When I knocked on the door, I was greeted by a person named Blair Brown. Once I was inside of the residential property, I spoke to an individual who identified himself as Carl George. Carl advised me that he occupied bedroom number 3.
Okay, and did Blair Brown advise you as to where he resided?
Specifically in terms of the bedroom numbers?
Or just in the home or in the building?
I don't recall.
Okay. And so you said you spoke to Blair Brown, and the other person's name again was?
Carl George. Mr. George told me he occupied bedroom number 3.
And what observations did you make of the premises, in addition to the numbers on the doors?
That's right.
Did you observe anything else? Were there any issues with respect to fire safety?
Yes, I noted a number of violations of the fire code that related to retrofits, as I was telling you, and these retrofits were necessary to bring existing building up to current life safety standards.
And did you speak to anybody about these violations, or what action did you take?
The action that I took was, as I was going through the property, I located the name of an individual who appeared to be the owner of the property, and I contacted this individual and advised this individual that I was at his property and I would like to meet with him at a later time to review the deficiencies.
And what was the name of that individual?
It was the owner of the property, Morgan Kaye.
All right, thank you. And did you subsequently, was there anything else you did on the property at that time, on that day?
On July 19th?
On July 19th.
Yes, I made notes of the layout, the deficiencies, and things that I would need to discuss with the owner in terms of the safety of the property.
And did you then subsequently have any discussions with Morgan Kaye?
Yes, I did. I met with Morgan Kaye in person. And when I met with him in person, we discussed the issues that were with the home.
Okay. And when did you meet with him in person?
I met with him on 3 separate occasions. The next occasion after the July meeting was August 11th. The one after that was the 15th, and the final one was the 26th.
And in those discussions, you said you mentioned what was wrong or the deficiencies in the home. What did Mr. Kaye say in response?
Well, I advised Mr. Kaye that there were many deficiencies with the house. For example, the bedrooms were being rented to individual tenants, and each of the bedrooms required a smoke alarm and a proper fire resistance door. None of the bedrooms had these. So based on what I saw, I issued a notice of violation that identified the specific sections of the fire code that were problematic. The fixes required to bring the house up to code, and I detailed that for him, including, for example, smoke alarms in each bedroom, as I indicated, the fire resistance doors, and the carbon monoxide.
And did these indications take the form of any sort of official notification? Was there any sort of ticket written or something of that nature?
Yes, there was a notice of violation that was delivered to Mr. Kaye one day after the August 11th meeting. That notice was delivered to him on August 12th, and I brought it with me in person during my next meeting with him on August 15th.
And did Mr. Kaye receive this information or take it with him, or what happened with that?
He did receive the information and he was provided with a copy.
Okay. And did you subsequently attend at the premises?
Yes, I subsequently attended again on August 26th.
And what did you observe on August 26th?
And when I returned to the house for the fourth time, I saw some progress had been made on certain deficiencies, but there was still no correction to the 9 doors that needed to be retrofitted. The interconnected smoke alarm and pulse system had not been installed, and there were no smoke alarms in each bedroom. I reviewed these violations with Mr. Kaye directly. We then discussed the potential requirements for the house if it was to be rented to a single family instead, as the house had previously been done so in 2015. I told Mr. Kaye that in that case, the smoke alarms in each bedroom and fire resistant doors would not be required.
Okay, thank you. And did anything else happen on that day when you attended at the premises?
Nothing else.
And was that the last time that you attended the premises, or did you return at any point?
I returned again after the fire incident.
Tell us about the fire incident, Ms. Riley.
When I returned after the fire incident, I was very sad to, of course, hear that there had been a death. And I went through the property and I noticed, for example, that the fire had originated in room number 3 on the 2nd floor, which contained the hot plate. I noticed the doors of the 2nd floor bedrooms had locks on them. I did not find smoke alarms in each bedroom, and the doors had not been retrofitted. I found the burn remains of 1 smoke alarm on the staircase to the 2nd floor. This alarm had no batteries in it. I also saw 2 other alarms sitting on a shoe rack on the main floor. One was labeled main floor and other labeled basement. Both of these alarms had been removed by the firefighters. The main floor smoke alarm did not have any batteries. The basement smoke alarm had a battery, but it did not activate as it was out of smoke and out of the fire zone.
Okay, and just for the record, to be clear, when was the fire?
It's my understanding that a fire took place in the early morning of September 14th, 2019.
And you attended at the premises when exactly?
I attended immediately on that day.
All right, so immediately after the fire on the 14th of September?
Yes, so what had happened is one day before, on September 13th, I had received a voicemail from Mr. Kaye requesting a further inspection of the house to confirm that all the violations had been addressed. It was my intention to schedule a visit for the following day. However, in the early morning, I received the call about the fire, and I went to the house immediately to determine its origin and cause.
So just to be clear, on September 13th, you received a call from Mr. Kaye?
Yes, requesting a further inspection of the house to confirm that all the violations had been addressed, which we had discussed on 4 separate occasions.
So Mr. Kaye was requesting this on the understanding that they had been addressed, is that correct?
I'm not sure what his understanding was. He just indicated to me that a further inspection of the house to confirm that all the violations had been addressed.
Okay, and did you attend subsequently, or did you have any further contact with Mr. Kaye after the 14th of September?
I've had some contact just through the normal course of this court action taking place in terms of giving statements about what I saw, but no further contact.
No further contact, and you haven't attended the premises subsequently to that?
Subsequent to my origin and cause investigation, no, I have not.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Riley, my name is David Dentino. I'm defense counsel for Mr. Kaye. I'm going to be asking you some questions. So I'd like you to listen carefully to the questions that I have and answer them to the best of your ability.
Okay, thank you.
So you testified earlier that on Friday, July the 19th, you attended the 50 Knightsbridge Garden Circle property to conduct an inspection. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And you indicated that you were granted permission to enter that premises by someone called Blair Brown. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Did you take any steps to verify that Mr. Brown was a lawful resident or owner of the house before entering the property?
Yes, I identified myself to Mr. Brown prior to being welcomed into the home. I explained who I was and why I was there. I also provided him with identification and explanation for the reason of my visit, and it was only then that Mr. Brown granted me access to the house.
What did you tell Mr. Brown was the purpose of your visit?
I told Mr. Brown that I was a fire prevention officer and investigator with the Mariposa Fire Police, and I was responsible for the residential safety of buildings to ensure compliance with fire and regulations, and that I had been dispatched to the property to inspect the property.
And how did you identify that Mr. Brown was a legal resident of that property?
I indicated who I was, and Mr. Brown did not then indicate to me that he was not or was a legal resident of the property, and I was not permitted to come in.
Now, Mr. Brown, you subsequently discovered that Mr. Brown was not the owner of the home. That was my client, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And were you granted, were you subsequently granted permission by my client to enter the home on subsequent occasions?
Yes, I was.
All right. So you testified that you had attended the property on 4 occasions. The first was on July the 19th, and then the second was on August 11th, 2019. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's correct. Yes.
Okay. And now I understand that upon your first inspection on the July the 19th, you had identified a number of fire code violations. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And you've told us about a number of them. One of them was that there was an upstairs kitchen, for example, that was not allowed. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And I'm going to suggest to you that once you made Mr. Kaye aware that that upstairs kitchen was not allowed, he actually demolished that kitchen, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay. And you talked about the smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, and fire-resistant doors, right?
Correct.
And so on August 26, 2019, you subsequently visited the property again.
Yes, that's correct.
And you agree with me that there was some progress made on some of the violations.
Well, while I saw some progress had been made on certain deficiencies, there was still no correction to the 9 doors that needed to be retrofitted, or the interconnected smoke alarm and pull system had not been installed, as well as there were no smoke alarms in each of the bedrooms, as I had discussed with him previously.
Right, but at this point, he had not only demolished the kitchen, but he also installed a carbon monoxide detector as well, right?
He made some progress with some deficiencies.
Right. Now, on this particular visit, what else did you discuss?
I reviewed the ongoing deficiencies with Mr. Kaye. As I indicated, there was some progress, but a lot of the deficiencies had not been corrected. I told him that there was still no correction to the 9 doors that needed to be retrofitted, and the interconnected smoke alarm and pull system had not been installed, and that there were no smoke alarms in each bedroom.
Now, on the 4th visit, you returned on August 26th. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So this is the 4th visit in a little over 4 weeks. You agree with me?
About 5 weeks, but more or less the same.
Right. July 19th, the first one, August 26th, the 4th one. So somewhere between a little over 4 weeks, 5 weeks.
That's correct.
Okay. On this date, you discussed potential requirements if my client were to rent the house to a single family instead, correct?
Yes, yes, we discussed the potential requirements for the house if it was to be rented to a single family instead, as the house had been in 2015. I told Mr. Kaye that if that were the case, the smoke alarms in each bedroom and fire-resistant doors would not be required.
I'm going to suggest to you that during this this conversation, my client raised some concerns with you about the cost of these retrofits. Do you recall that?
No, I do not recall that.
I'm going to suggest to you that you advised Mr. Kaye to prepare a document specifying that he was renting the upper floors of the property to people as a family, not individual tenants, and that in that case, they were responsible for maintaining their own smoke alarms.
I absolutely did not. We discussed the potential requirements for the house if it were to be rented to a single family instead, as it had been in 2015.
Did you have any discussions about having one individual pay the rent collectively for all the other tenants?
Absolutely not.
I'm going to suggest to you it's possible that in the context of this discussion, Mr. Kaye, my client, interpreted this conversation as advice. Do you think that's possible?
It's not possible. He has good English speaking skills, never indicated to me that he didn't understand.
After this visit on the 26th, you testified that you received a voicemail from my client, correct?
Yes, I did.
And Mr. Kaye had contacted you on his own accord to ask you for further inspection.
Yes, he contacted me to inspect the property on a further occasion to see if he had fixed the deficiencies properly.
So would you agree with me then that Mr. Kaye was making good faith efforts to bring his property up to code during this period?
It's not my job, sir, to opine on someone's character or their faith. It's just to really look at a property, tell you if there's deficiencies, and if there's outstanding deficiencies, to communicate that with you.
You weren't able to carry out that further inspection because of the fire?
Yes, that's correct.
So I understand the fire took place on the morning of September the 14th, 2019, and you attended to determine the origin of and cause of the fire.
Yes, that is correct.
What was the origin and cause of the fire?
As I walked through the fire scene, I found that the fire had originated in room number 3 on this 2nd floor, which contained the hot plate. I noticed that the doors of the 2nd floor bedrooms had locks on them. I did not find smoke alarms in each bedroom, and the doors had not been retrofitted. I found the burned remains of one smoke alarm on the staircase to the 2nd floor. This alarm had no batteries in it. I also saw 2 other alarms sitting on a shoe rack on the main floor. One was labeled main floor and the other labeled basement. Both of these alarms had been removed by the firefighters. The main floor smoke alarm did not have any batteries. The basement smoke alarm had a battery, but it did not activate as it was out of the smoke/fire zone.
So you indicated the fire had originated in room number 3, and this was the room of Carl George.
That is correct.
In all of your inspections of the home, did you ever notice that Mr. George had a hot plate in his room?
I did not.
Did you inspect each individual room when you did these inspections previously?
As I indicated earlier, during my first visit in July, I was granted permission to come into the home. And once I arrived in the home, I noticed that there were multiple different bedrooms. Each bedroom had a number on it, but it was locked.
Okay, so you didn't go in.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Now, in your discussion with Mr. Kaye on August 26th, you had testified that if he had rented those upstairs rooms to a family instead of individual tenants, in that scenario, the family would be responsible for the maintenance of the smoke alarms, correct?
I told him what the law would be if the home was converted to a single family instead of this multiple tenant situation that he had. I didn't give him a specific example of how to do it.
Do you remember giving a sworn statement to the police?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and so I'm going to show you that statement, and I want you to let me know if you recognize it. Do you recognize this statement?
Yes, I do.
And on the third page, there's a signature there. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Your Honor, may I have permission to approach the witness? Thank you. So I'm going to turn your attention to your statement. And I want to bring to your attention what you had written at lines 49 to 51.
Just one moment, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and so in this portion of your statement, you write, and I quote, "We then discussed the potential requirements for the house if it was rented to a single family, as it had been in 2015. I told Morgan that in that case, the smoke alarms in each bedroom and fire-resistant doors would not be required."
Yes, that's correct.
Right, so you agree with me that that's an accurate representation of what your conversation with Mr. Kaye contained on August 26th?
Along with everything else that's in that statement, but as
Right.
in accordance with what you've read, yes, I do agree with that.
All right, and so in that sort of scenario, if it had been rented to a single family, then you would agree that the smoke alarms in each bedroom and the fire-resistant doors would not have been required.
If it had been converted to a single family home, yes, that would not be required.
All right. Now, when you did the inspection after the fire, you would agree with me that you found the smoke alarm, for example, in the upper hallway did not have batteries in it.
Yes.
And that would indicate, for example, a lack of maintenance. Would you agree with me?
What do you mean by that? Can you expand?
I'm going to suggest to you that part of maintaining proper working smoke alarms would be to keep batteries in them so that they function. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
And so the absence of those batteries would, and I would suggest to you, indicate that they weren't being maintained.
Yes.
Okay. All right, those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Crown will now ask Siham some questions. The Crown will be required to hit unmute.
Thank you for that reminder. Can you please state your name for the record?
Yes, it's Siham Sanga.
And Ms. Sanga, what is it that you do for a living?
I work at Fifi's Bakery, just near the apartment that caught fire.
And where do you reside?
Well, up until the fire, I lived at 50 Knights Bridge Garden Circle. I've moved in with friends now.
So your home was damaged in the fire?
Yes.
All right. So where were you on the morning of August 27th, 2019?
I was at home. I had just finished a shift at the bakery.
And so was that the day of the fire or was it a different date?
That was a different date.
Okay, so, and the fire took place when?
September 14.
Right. And so were you at home the day of the fire?
I was.
Can you tell us what happened?
Well, I don't really remember much about that. It was the night. I was home listening to music in my room and sort of just about to doze off, and I heard one of the smoke alarms go off in the home. And I went to open my door handle and it was very hot, although I did manage to open it, burning my hand a bit. I think I screamed as a result of the injury to my hand, because that's when Parker came out of their room, and I also saw Carl trying to bat the flames away, and I yelled at him to sort of come, let's go, but he said no, he was trying to put the fire out himself, and I don't know why he was thinking that. Like, it was too much fire, we really needed to get out. The whole floor was filling up with smoke. Seemed like flames were everywhere, really hard to breathe, and at that point I passed out. I don't really remember anything else, although Parker and I must have managed to get out, because obviously I did get out. That's really all I remember until I woke up the next day in the hospital.
Okay, so Parker also resides in the property?
Yes, yeah.
And when you're referring to Parker, you're referring to, what's his last name?
Reed, Parker Reed.
Okay, and you mentioned Carl as well. What's Carl's full name?
George, Carl George.
Okay, and you said that you and Parker made it out of the property. Did you see Carl again?
No.
Which unit did you live in?
I lived on the second floor, one of the units on the second floor.
Okay, and you said you heard a smoke alarm. Was the smoke alarm located in your unit?
No, I don't think so. No, I honestly, I don't really remember. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't know that if I heard a smoke alarm or if it was just like I smelled a lot of smoke, and I was anyway, I was very confused about what happened that night.
Okay, so you're not sure you heard a smoke alarm.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you said you were not feeling well. You're confused about what happened that night?
Well, I was feeling fine at the start of the night, but I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have a good memory of it now yet.
And are there smoke alarms or carbon monoxide alarms in the unit? Were there that you were aware of?
There were fire alarms throughout the second floor. They were always giving us problems, but there were smoke alarms, yes.
What kind of problems would they give you?
Well, they would go off like if you use your toaster, so I admit, and I feel pretty guilty about this, like once or twice I did remove the batteries if I was, cooking something, but then I would replace them again, but I always put them back, but there seemed to be something wrong with them all the time.
Okay.
They went off. I bake a lot because I work in a bakery, and they would go off often when I was baking.
And so on the evening in question, though, this is not, were you baking?
No.
Okay. No.
Yeah, I think I misspoke earlier. I was confusing those days. The fire alarm did not go off the night of the fire. I apologize for confusing you.
Okay. Thank you. So you, just to be clear, you didn't hear a fire alarm on the night of the fire,
No.
but you were awakened.
Well, yeah, I was dozing off. I was awakened by like a ruckus and the smoke, and there's definitely smoke all over.
And you said that you touched the door handle and it was hot. Were you treated in hospital for the injury? Did you receive injuries in this
Yes,
fire?
I was treated for smoke inhalation, and I had, I believe, 2nd-degree burns on my both my hands and my face.
Okay. And did you lose any property, or what happened to you as a result of the fire?
Well, I had to move, and yeah, so I didn't have really much in the apartment, but yeah, it's really disrupted my life for sure.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. That's it then. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is David Dintino. I'm a defense lawyer for Mr. Kaye. I'm going to be asking you some questions. So I'd like you to listen, please, very carefully and answer my questions to the best of your ability.
Sure.
Okay. So I wanted to take you back to a date before the day of the fire. I want to take you back to the morning of August 27th, 2019. Do you recall that day?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest to you that on that day, particularly in the morning, you and your fellow tenants had a discussion with Mr. Kaye. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell me, what do you remember from August 27th, 2019?
I had come off of a night, like a long shift. I'd worked overnight at Fifi's, so I was trying to sleep in the morning. It was late morning. I was pretty tired. And that's when Morgan knocked on my door, and then he knocked on Parker, Mr. Reed, and Carl's, Mr. George's doors. Or he must have, because when I came out, they were also already out in the hallway. And we were all kind of confused. Morgan didn't really show up kind of unannounced like that to the house. And I thought it was kind of odd because I couldn't even remember the last time that Carl and Parker and I were all together at the same time. We worked sort of different shifts. And I remember we had a discussion with Morgan about, making sure we weren't playing with the fire alarms, because we complained about them to him. And so, I think he knew that sometimes we had to take the batteries out if we were, baking or cooking or anything like that. So he talked to us about that. And then sort of strangely, he said that we should sort of from now on treat each other like we were living together as a family, or like we were to act like we were living as a family. I didn't really understand, to be honest with you. And I just was so tired from my shift. I just wanted to get back to bed. I wasn't really truthfully paying much attention to what Morgan was saying about it all. But he had said something about us having to pay our rent all together. And at the time, I didn't really understand what was happening because I really barely knew Carl and Parker. They seemed like decent people, but I didn't know them. But they both gave me their portion of the rent the next day. I guess it would have been the 28th. And then I took that money and just prepared one check for Morgan for the total amount of the rent that each of us owed for our separate units. I thought that was kind of weird, but I sort of gave the check to Morgan, and I didn't think much about it. Again, although I did think I should follow up with Morgan at some point about it, but I never did.
Okay. So this conversation took place in the morning after you had worked a long shift.
Right. That's what I said. Yeah.
Right. And so you agree with me that you were tired, feeling groggy?
Yeah, I said that. Yeah.
And so there were a number of topics that you discussed. So starting with the issue of the fire alarms, you had told the Crown Attorney earlier about disconnecting or the fire alarms or removing the batteries. Do you recall that?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. How often would you disconnect or remove the batteries from the fire alarms?
A couple of times, once or twice. I don't know.
Did you ever inform Mr. Kaye that you were doing this?
Well, we told him that they were problematic and that they were always going off.
But you didn't specifically inform him that you were removing the batteries from the smoke alarms?
I don't recall what I told him specifically.
Did you ever tell your fellow tenants that you were removing the batteries from the fire alarms?
Again, I don't recall a specific discussion about it.
Now, the discussion that you had about paying the rent of the family as a family unit or collectively, did you understand the context of the discussion at that time?
No, it was so strange and kind of out of the blue.
Okay. I'm going to present you with a document, and I want you to tell me if you recognize this document. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Thank you. So I'd like you to have a look at this document. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
Okay. Do you recognize the signature on the bottom of the document?
I think one of them is my signature.
That's correct. So that under the line tenant, I'm going to suggest that that's your signature.
Yes.
Okay. So this document says, and I quote, I, Morgan Kaye, the owner of 50 Knightsbridge Garden Circle, gave you the upper level, Siham, Sanga, Parker, Reed, Carl, George to rent as a family, not as individual tenants. You are sharing the common areas and using the bedrooms. You are to maintain 2 smoke alarms, one in the kitchen hall main floor, the other in the hallway on the upper floor in operating condition. A carbon monoxide alarm is plugged in the hallway near the bedrooms of the upper floor in operating condition. If any of you or your visitors take out the smoke alarms, batteries, or carbon monoxide alarm, you are responsible for this. You will pay the rent as a family by one person. Do you agree that I'm reading from this document truthfully?
That's what it says. I don't remember signing it, but yes, I see that's what it says.
Okay. So your understanding of the context of this discussion seems to be that it wasn't there, that you weren't really understanding the context of the discussion. Would you agree with me?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Why then did you sign that document?
I don't remember signing it.
But you would agree that you did sign it.
It looks like my signature, but I don't remember signing it. It was all very confusing conversation. It made very little sense to me, but didn't really matter to me at the time.
Okay. Now, did you ever follow up with Mr. Kaye about your lack of understanding about this conversation on August 27, 2019?
I didn't, no.
Why not?
I just didn't have the time. I work a crazy schedule, and I just didn't have the opportunity between then and the fire was a few weeks later.
All right. Your Honor, can we please have this document entered as Exhibit 2? Thank you very much. Now, on the night of the fire, you testified that you saw Carl George and he was trying to put out the fire himself.
Yeah, that's right.
And you don't recall hearing any smoke alarms that night, right?
No, that was my mistake. No.
And I'm going to suggest to you that the reason why the fire alarms didn't go off is because the batteries were pulled out of them. You agree with me?
Are you saying that I pulled them out? I didn't pull out batteries.
I'm going to suggest, well, I'm not suggesting that you pulled them out, but I'm going to suggest to you that that the batteries were not in the smoke alarms.
I find that hard to believe. I don't know why they wouldn't be.
Now, I'm going to suggest to you that when the fire inspectors inspected the house, that they did confirm the smoke alarm in the upper hallway did not have batteries in them. You don't think that's possible?
I just don't know. I don't know. I'm surprised that you're telling me that. I don't know one way or the other. I didn't take them out. That's all I know.
In the past, you had indicated that you had taken the batteries out of the smoke alarms, but that you had always put them back in.
Right.
Do you think it's possible that you forgot one night when it was late and you were coming home for a late shift. Do you think it's possible that you forgot to replace those batteries?
I don't think that's possible. I would do it. I would take them out if I had something baking that I knew was gonna, sort of smell up the hallway, and then I would put them back in. I don't think it's possible.
On the night of the fire, you testified that it was the commotion and the smoke that alerted you to the fire.
Right.
Do you think that if the smoke alarms were working, that you would have been alerted to the fire sooner?
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of the smoke alarms. Yeah, I agree with that.
And if everybody knew about the fire sooner, perhaps Carl would have made it out of the house alive.
Sure. Yeah, I think so.
Did you know that Carl had a hot plate in his room?
No, I barely knew Carl. So no, I didn't know he had a hot plate.
To your knowledge, did anyone else in the house know or ever mention that Carl had a hot plate in his room?
So I don't know if anyone else knew, and no one else mentioned it to me. So I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you.
The defense will now call its witness.
Yes, thank you. So I'll be calling my client, Morgan Kaye, to the stand. Mr. Kaye, can you please state your full name?
Morgan Kaye.
Okay, Mr. Kaye, I'm going to be asking you some questions. I want you to listen carefully and answer my questions to the best of your ability.
Okay.
Are you the sole owner of the property at 50 Knightsbridge Garden Circle?
I am.
Okay. When did you acquire this property?
In June 2015.
And what was the purpose of purchasing this property?
I bought it as an investment property to generate income.
After you purchased it, did you make any modifications or retrofits to the property?
I did. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs, and I installed locks on all of the bedroom doors and also on the door that led down to the basement.
Did you ever rent this property to any tenants?
Yeah, so when I bought the house, it was being rented by a family, but after I bought it, I rented the house to students.
Okay, and can you tell the court who lived in the property and describe their living arrangements, please?
So at the time of the fire, there were 3 bedrooms upstairs, and I rented these to Parker Reed, Siham, Sanga, and Carl George, and then Blair Brown was renting the basement.
Now, you have obviously heard some testimony earlier from Inspector Alex Riley. Have you had any prior interactions with this person?
I have, yes.
Okay. When did you first hear from Inspector Riley?
She called me in July of 2019.
And do you recall what was discussed during this conversation?
Yeah, she told me that she'd inspected the house and found fire code violations and that the upstairs kitchen had to be removed.
Okay. And as a result of this conversation, what steps, if any, did you take?
Well, I immediately demolished the kitchen, removing the wall as well as the oven and the refrigerator, and I also installed carbon dioxide monitors on each of the floors.
After you completed those modifications, did you ever hear from Inspector Riley after July 19th?
Yeah, we met a few more times at the house to discuss progress on fixing the violations.
All right. And you heard Officer Riley testify that there were a number of violations pointed out to you. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Did you understand the nature of the retrofits that you were required to make?
I didn't really. I didn't understand some of the requirements. She talked about needing to retrofit 9 doors, and there was only 3 apartments. So they were very technical. All I knew is they sounded very expensive and sounded like they'd be very disruptive to the tenants.
Did you ever raise these concerns? You've mentioned that you were concerned about expense and also disruption to the tenants. Did you ever raise those concerns with Inspector Riley?
I did. On our last meeting in August, I asked Officer Riley if there was any other way I could comply with the fire code other than making the expensive retrofits.
And what, if anything, was her response to that concern?
So Officer Riley said that if the second floor was rented to a family with one person paying the rent for everyone, then I wouldn't need to complete the expensive retrofits.
And so when you had this discussion with Inspector Riley and she talked to you about renting the upstairs as a family and having the rent paid collectively, how did you interpret what she was saying to you?
Well, given the conversation, I assumed she was giving me advice on how to avoid having to do the retrofits. She was telling me how to comply with the fire code.
Okay. And after you had this conversation and you received this advice from Inspector Riley, what, if anything, did you do?
So she had suggested that I prepare a document to have the tenants sign that would specify that they would be living as a family and not as individual tenants. So I did that. I prepared the document and then I went to the house to meet with the tenants.
And do you recall when this meeting took place?
So it was the very next day after I had met with Officer Riley, so it would have been August 27th.
And who was present at this meeting?
So it was myself and the three upstairs tenants, so that was Siham, Parker, and Carl.
And what, if anything, did you tell them at this meeting?
So I told them about the requirements and that they would be renting the upstairs unit as a family as opposed to individuals, that one person would pay the rent on behalf of the group, and that they would then be responsible for maintaining those batteries in the smoke detectors and the smoke alarms.
Did anyone raise any objections to this new arrangement?
No, they all agreed to adopt these new practices.
Okay, I'm going to show you a document which is Exhibit 2, and I want you to let me know if you recognize this document. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Thank you. Do you recognize this document, sir?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize any of the signatures on the document?
Yeah, so my signature is the one beside owner, and Siam Sanga's signature is the one beside tenant.
Who prepared this document?
I did.
Okay. Now, you indicated that you had this discussion with the all three of the upstairs tenants. Why is it that only your signature and CM's signature are there?
The meeting was a bit rushed. I think CM wanted to go back to bed, and I just recall that Carl and Parker didn't have a chance to sign it, so I left it with them to sign, but they did not sign it during the meeting.
Did any of those three upstairs tenants ever follow up with you about this agreement after this discussion took place?
Well, other than CM paid me the rent on behalf of all three of them as specified in the agreement, so they were complying with that part of the agreement, but no, I didn't hear anything specific, no other discussions.
After this agreement was reached with your upstairs tenants, did you do any further work on the property?
Yeah, so I completed all of the corrective work that Officer Riley had specified would apply to people living as a family, and I also directed the tenants that they had to remove the locks from their bedroom doors because that was one of the conditions that had to be met.
And did you have the opportunity to attend the property to see if they had removed those locks?
No, I had planned a visit to the house on September 15th, but that obviously was the day after the fire. So as a result of the fire, I never got a chance to go back and see whether that had been done.
Okay. Now, going to the fire, I understand, or I recall Inspector Riley had testified earlier that the cause of the fire, the fire originated in Carl's room, and that they found a hot plate in his room. Do you remember that?
I do.
Did you have any knowledge about Carl having a hot plate in his room?
I had no idea about that, no.
If you had known prior to the fire that Carl was using a hot plate in his room, what would you have done?
I would have told him to remove the hot plate and to only cook in the kitchen.
Did you know that one of your tenants was routinely removing batteries from the upper hallway smoke detector?
No, I had absolutely no idea that was happening.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with your tenants prior about the maintenance of those smoke detectors?
I mean, I told them that it was their responsibility to maintain the batteries and the smoke detectors.
All right, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaye, I have a few follow-up questions and cross-examination. I'm the Crown Attorney.
You'll just have to turn on your video.
Right. I'll get this right yet. Mr. Kaye, it's correct that you met with Ms. Riley on several occasions, yes?
That is correct.
And so why was it necessary for you to meet so many times? Tell us a little bit about why.
Well, so we'd had the original phone call where she had described some of the deficiencies she found, and then we met a couple more times at the house so she could explain them to me and I could show her the progress I was making on clearing the deficiencies. So it was to keep sort of working together on resolving these issues.
But infractions had been issued against you.
That's correct, yes.
So it was not an entirely collaborative process.
I mean, you know, she needed to make sure that the violations were being fixed and I needed to fix the violations. So the purpose of the meetings were so I could check whether or not the work I'd done to correct the violations was satisfying her.
Okay, and you had a meeting scheduled, you said, on September 15th?
No, that meeting was to check to see whether the tenants had removed the locks on the doors.
So, but did you have a meeting that was pending at the time of the fire? Did you have a meeting pending with Ms. Riley?
So I had called Miss Riley when I had finished doing all the things she had suggested, and I had asked her to go back to the house with me to confirm that all the work had been done, but we hadn't set up a meeting. I don't think it was going to take place after the fire happened anyway.
So you've testified that you attended at the premises on August 27th, but this
Yes.
correct? Yep. But you didn't have occasion to inspect whether the locks had been removed subsequently to that?
Well, so it was at the August 27th meeting that I told the tenants that the locks had to be removed.
Okay.
And then my next visit was going to be on September 15th.
So you did not attend at the premises between August 27th and September 15th?
I did not.
So I'm perplexed as to on what basis did you form the opinion that you were ready to show Ms. Riley that all the changes had been made that were required?
Well, everything I had done. So in terms of, you know, the carbon monoxide and the changes I had made and having the new agreement with the tenants to live as a family. So I just wanted to make sure all those things were correct. And you know, I was going to meet with the tenants on September 15th to check on the locks on the doors, which would have been before the meeting I was going to have with Officer Riley.
Okay, so going back to August 27th, what time did you attend at the premises that day?
I believe it was in the morning.
You don't know what time though?
I don't recall.
Okay, and so you met with who on that day?
I met with the 3 upstairs tenants, so that's CM, Parker, and Carl.
And so at that time you brought an agreement that you had prepared?
That's correct.
And one of the terms of that agreement was that all 3 were supposed to sign it?
So the purpose of the agreement was for them to sign it, yes.
And so but yet not all 3 of them signed it?
That's correct.
So is it possible perhaps they didn't understand the purpose of the agreement and the details of it if they didn't all sign it as required?
They never said they didn't understand it.
But yet they didn't sign it.
Well, CM signed it and Parker and Carl didn't have an opportunity to sign it then, but I left it with them to sign when they were able.
So really the agreement wasn't concluded without all 3 signatures.
Well, I mean, you know, it wasn't a contract and it wasn't a lease. It was simply an acknowledgement of the new living arrangements. And CM signed it, and then CM paid me the rent on behalf of all 3 of them. So from that, I took it that they had all understood the new arrangements because they were abiding by it.
So did these 3 tenants live on the premises prior to August 27th?
Yes, they were, earlier in the year, I had rented to the 3 of them upstairs.
And so you had lease agreements with each of them separately?
That's right.
And did they know each other prior to that?
I don't know. I don't have any reason to think that they did.
So on what basis are they a family?
I don't know on what basis they're a family. I was simply following Officer Riley's recommendation that I should have the three of them agree to live as a family and meet these conditions in order that I wouldn't have to do the expensive retrofits.
So you're suggesting that Officer Riley recommended the three of them become a family?
Well, to live in the house as a family, yes, that's what she said.
So Officer Riley has indicated that if a family was living on the premises, the requirements would be different. It seems a bit different from converting three separate individuals who are unrelated into being a family.
Is that a question?
Well, I guess my question is, are you sure that's what Ms. Riley meant?
Well, in the context of the conversation where I was asking her what steps could I take that wouldn't involve the expensive retrofits to bring myself in compliance, she mentioned that if they were living as a family, the expensive retrofits wouldn't be necessary. And then it was her suggestion that I get them to sign the document acknowledging they were living as a family. That I would never have thought of that agreement. That was her idea.
Okay, thank you. And you said that you maintain, you over the course of the summer, you changed the fire protection measures to comply with the requirements set forth by Ms. Riley. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say over the course of the summer. She had her original inspection in July, and then sort of between July and August was when we met and I was doing the corrective work.
And in your view, there was still outstanding corrective work between August 27th and September 15th?
So the only outstanding issue then that was remaining was whether or not the tenants had removed the locks on their doors.
Okay. You testified that you didn't know that Carl had a hot plate. Did you at any point forbid him from having a hot plate?
No, but I would have thought that when we were ordered to take the kitchen out from upstairs, it would have been understood that there was to be no cooking upstairs and the cooking was to take place in the main floor kitchen.
But that wasn't made explicit.
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, that I guess concludes everything.
No, I still have Blair Brown.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So, Your Honor, I'll now be calling my second and last witness, Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown, could you state your name for the record, please?
I'm Blair Brown.
Ms. Brown, what is your connection to the property at 50 Knightsbridge Garden Circle?
So I moved into the property in August 2017. I used to live upstairs. And then in May, I moved, well, the end of April, beginning of May, I moved downstairs and lived there. That's May 2019. I moved downstairs to the basement.
And were there any other residents at this property?
When I moved downstairs, there were three more people. There were three people upstairs. We didn't know each other, but we got along. You know, we all moved in around the same time. So that was Siham and Parker and Carl.
So you had no prior, you didn't know these folks prior to them moving in the house?
No, I went upstairs. We met each other when we were moving, and I went upstairs when there was some really yummy baking going on.
And once you all moved in under the same roof, how did you get along?
We were pretty friendly. We all got along fine.
What can you tell me about each of your roommates?
Well, I know that Carl was home a lot. I'm not sure if he worked from home or if he was looking for work, but he just kind of hung out a lot. Parker, I didn't really talk to, and Siham was a baker. And that was the most awesome because I am a wannabe baker and she's the real thing. So it was pretty awesome.
And so, how did you know that Siham was a baker?
As I said, I would go upstairs to use the kitchen, and Sam was often trying out recipes and was, her really well known for the ground nut cakes in particular. That was sort of like her signature dish.
And did Siam's baking ever cause any problems in the house?
Well, there was certainly no problem with eating all of her experiments, but we did sometimes have the smoke alarm go off, and that was kind of a drag, especially if like she was coming home from a shift and had a great idea at work and wanted to, bake at 8:30. Meanwhile, Carl might still be in bed and I might, be having a late shift, so I'm in bed, and that was kind of a pain. So that was a problem.
And so, did you, when the fire alarm would go off, how would Siam deal with it?
I saw her try and stop it. It was it was on the ceiling, and so she used a broom to try and turn it off. I heard that she might have taken the batteries out, but I never actually saw that. So I don't know.
Now, at some point, there was some work being done on the house. Were you aware that your landlord was ordered to do some work on the house?
I didn't know that it was I didn't know about all the paperwork. I just knew that there were repairs done, and I had let in the inspector. At one point, I was just leaving for work at the college, and he was arriving, and I let him in. So, it didn't really impact me much. So it's not like I sat down and tried to put all the pieces together. But after the fire, I realized, oh yeah, that must have been required.
Do you recall any of the sort of work that your landlord was doing in your unit or in the house?
Well, I do remember the landlord telling me that he had found a good price on smoke alarms. We often kind of traded back, I saw this deal at Boxmart and whatever. And so I do remember that. He knew that I was a bargain hunter, and he told me about that when he was headed off to get them. But that was pretty much it.
Okay. And aside from the fire alarms, was there a discussion about any other installations or modifications with you?
Not with me in the basement, no.
Okay. What about elsewhere in the house? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I don't know anything from when maybe there were changes, but that's not something my roommates told me, or my housemates really told me about. There was nothing really that impacted me or that I knew about.
Okay. Now, where were you on the night of the fire?
So the fire hadn't happened yet that night. I left. It was about 10:30, and I was going out to meet some friends. And asked Carl if he wanted to come with us, because quite often, if he didn't come out with us, we'd often see him at the bar anyway. So I asked him, and he said no. He was hungry. He was going to stay home and make some mac and cheese. And I said, okay, raise a glass for you, and left. Went out to the bar with my friends, and then I came home about 2:15. And oh my God, the smoke. Saw the firefighters. Normally I have no problem meeting firefighters, but I prefer to do that in the bar than outside the house that's burning. And I was just kind of blown away by the situation. I guess I was in shock, worried about my roommate, my housemates, my belongings, all of that.
And so, prior to the prior evening, you had saw Carl before the night before the fire.
Yeah.
And what were you and Carl doing at the house?
I was just getting ready to go out, so I went upstairs, as I often do, just to, pop into the kitchen, refill my water bottle, and that's when I ran into Carl, and I asked him if he wanted to come out.
All right. Was Carl drinking that evening?
I mean, I didn't see him drink, but it wouldn't be unusual.
Okay, so I want to show you, do you remember giving a statement to the police?
I do, but I was in a lot of, like, it was really stressful time, so I don't remember exactly what I said.
Okay. Your Honor, can I approach the witness to refresh the witness's memory? Thank you. So I'm going to show you a document. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
Okay, is that your signature at the bottom of the document?
That is.
If you were to look at this document, would it refresh your memory?
I'm sure it would.
Okay, so can you look at lines 45 to 47, please?
Okay, can you read that out just for the transcript?
All right. So on the night of the fire, I left the house around 10:30 p.m. to go to the bar with my friends. Before I left, I had a few drinks with Carl. Since he usually likes to party, I asked Carl if he wanted to come out with my friends, but he declined the invitation.
Oh, yeah. I remember that now. I remember that I went upstairs, filled up my water bottle, ran into Carl, and we just started chatting. So we grabbed a couple of beer and just sat around and drank before I went out. You're right. I totally forgot about that part.
So you were having drinks with Carl on that evening, the night before the fire.
Yeah.
And you indicated that he usually likes to party. Have you ever gone out drinking with Carl before?
Sometimes I'd ask him to join my friends and I. Originally, it was more that I would go out with them and then we would see Carl, and he was often drinking by himself, and that's no fun. So we would invite him over and my friends got to know him. So yeah, I'm no doctor. I can't tell whether someone's, an alcoholic or not. It is a college town and lots of people party. And so, yeah, like he was a drinker.
Did you ever encounter Carl at times where he's had too much to drink?
Yeah, I had to help him home a few times. So I guess it was good that I ran into him because then, he had a sober buddy. But yeah, he didn't always know where to draw the line.
Did you have any knowledge of Carl having a hot plate in his room?
When he said he was going to make mac and cheese, I guess he could have made it in his room. It didn't really, do I remember seeing it? I guess. We all had different appliances in our rooms.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay, yeah, Ms. Brown, I have some follow-up questions. I'm the Crown Attorney. You mentioned on the night of the fire, so September 13th, you went out in the evening?
Yeah.
And so you met up with Carl prior to going out?
That's right.
And you folks had a couple drinks together, or do you know how many?
We had a few, so probably 2 beers for me, 3 for him.
Okay. And when you awoke on the 14th of September, what woke you up?
So I came on the 14th. I actually came home from the bar to find the fire.
So you weren't sleeping. You came home and it was already on fire.
Yeah, I came home, and it was that's certainly my recollection, is coming back from the bar and seeing the firefighters.
So you weren't inside the property?
Not that I remember.
Because Ms. Sanga has testified that she saw you upstairs, I believe, in the property.
Well, I was drinking too, so I guess it's possible I could have come in, but it's also possible she could have seen me upstairs before I went out. So
everyone's quite confused.
What I know is that I asked Carl out. He said he didn't want to come out with me, but we did have a couple drinks at the house first. Then I went out. Then I came back.
Okay. And you said just now, in speaking to my colleague, the defense counsel, you mentioned that everyone had appliances in their rooms. What kind of appliances did everyone have in their rooms?
So just like hot pots, or like a plug-in flat grill, just small, or kettle, stuff like that.
So all of the tenants, to your knowledge, had small cooking appliances in their rooms?
At least one, like, for me, I just had a kettle. But, you know, the hot pot's kind of a combination kettle, like, cooker. Yeah.
Did you have any conversations with with Ms. Riley about those cooking appliances?
No, I don't recall. I mean, if I had been told to not have it, then I would have gotten rid of it. But I think maybe a kettle might be different than like actually preparing food. Presumably, just a kettle won't be a problem.
So nobody told you, Ms. Riley, nobody else said no cooking upstairs?
Yeah, nobody. I mean, I just cooked in the kitchen, which obviously I assumed I could do. And occasionally I'd make like a cup of tea in the basement. But even when I lived upstairs, like there were no rules about who could use what, where. We rented the house, we paid our rent, we used our rooms.
Okay, so when you met, Ms. Riley says you met with her on August 27th. Do you remember that meeting?
Yeah, I think that was when I let her in. Like I was on my
Okay.
way to work and she was coming in and she needed access to the building. And so I let her in, but I was in a hurry, so we didn't really chat much.
So you just let Ms. Riley in, you didn't really have a conversation that day?
No, I just saw, like, I know the city gives them like ID. So I made sure it looked like what do I know? Could be fake, but I mean, it did. Someone came in with a uniform and ID and I looked at the ID and said, yep, you can hear, you know, landlord's not here, but sure, come take a look. I have to go. I have to get to work at college.
So did you meet with Mr. Kaye on August 27th?
I don't recall him being there, but like I said, I was really focused on getting out to work.
So Mr. Kaye has testified that you had a meeting on August 27th, the three tenants, you, Carl, and Siham, and that you came to an understanding of a new agreement that you would be living together as a family. Is that your recollection?
I remember somebody saying something about that. I think that was when like Siham had just come home from an overnight shift at the bakery. It was like 8 a.m. I was heading out. Carl was around, but and we were like, was it a meeting? We didn't really have time to talk about anything. I just remember the landlord saying, yeah, pool your money. Like, I just need one check. I don't need 4 checks. And I was like, sure, yeah, whatever. Like, I wasn't the one that was going to pool the money and pay it, so I didn't care. So I just said, yeah, and I just got ready for work.
So, okay. And so were you asked to sign a document at that time?
I honestly, I do not recall if there's something with my signature on it, like the police statement has my signature. So like if there's another document with my signature on it, then I guess I did.
Okay.
If there's no signature, then I guess I didn't.
Well, there is no signature, so it seems that perhaps you didn't sign it. So you didn't refuse to sign it.
I have like, there was no time.
Yeah.
I do know that like I really liked the place and I would have happily like signed anything to stay. But really it didn't really make much difference to me, like whether I paid directly or I paid to somebody else to pay him. Like I would have signed it, but I wouldn't have said we're family. Like if that's the question, like that's kind of silly. I'm not family with those people. We just met.
So you would not understand yourself to be a family member with them?
No, we shared a house. And in fact, I had even less interaction with the people upstairs because I was in the basement. I had my own like whole own unit and I just went upstairs for the kitchen and the ground nut cakes.
Right. Okay. So I understand those are good. So what about the locks on the doors? Do you have any recollection of a question about the locks being removed from the doors?
I think we all had, like I had a separate lock for my basement unit. I don't recall about upstairs, like after they moved in, like what they did upstairs.
Okay. Well, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
That concludes the questions.
Excellent. So that was over 40 minutes, but it seems like